To move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. I just give the front benches a very quick moment, very quickly, to leave the chamber. And I now come to the member, Graeme Downie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The topic for this, my first adjournment debate, is the issue of fair fuel pricing. This has been raised repeatedly to me by residents of Dunfermline and Dollar since I was elected in July, and it is also one that's been examined by previous governments of all colours and indeed by the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA. In July this year, the CMA said that weakened competition in the fuel sector is negatively impacting drivers' wallets. Their examination found that in 2023 alone, high prices cost motorists a staggering amount of money. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, this seems especially egregious. But this warning from the CMA was not the first or even the second significant warning around fuel pricing. After launching a market study in July 2022, which reported a year later and which made a series of recommendations to protect consumers, the CMA has issued 3 interim reports. In these reports, the CMA found that drivers were overcharged at the petrol pump by £900 million in 2022 and by a further £1.6 billion in 2023. Madam Deputy Speaker, that means that in just 2 years, drivers were overcharged by some £2.5 billion on their fuel in the midst of a cost of living crisis. That is shameful profiteering, which we know hits lower paid workers and families the hardest. The cost of living crisis has meant that changes in the prices of utilities and fuel have been sorely felt. Now, we've long understood the argument that rural drivers might pay more for fuel due to the increased logistical costs and additional staffing costs. I don't always find those arguments convincing, but they at least have a perceived logic to them. Fuel is not a luxury, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is a lifeline. It enables people to commute to work, take their children to school, provide care and support to loved ones. I'm happy to intervene. Happy to give way.
I'm very happy to intervene in the honourable gentleman. Can I congratulate the honourable gentleman for Dunfermline and Dollar for bringing this forward? I spoke to him beforehand as well. He and I share the same concerns in relation to fuel. Coming from the constituent of Strangford and himself from Dunfermline and Dollar, it seems to me that the drivers in rural constituents are very much at the mercy of those who would seek to charge more for fuel. Some have to travel further to get the cheaper fuel, and whether that's competitive or even logical could be argued. But does the honourable gentleman agree when it comes to competitiveness we must have fairness and equality for every postcode when we recognise that prices in Croydon in the Ards Peninsula and Dunfermline are similar, yet in Manchester it's almost 8 pence a litre cheaper?
Thank you very much. I thank my honourable member for the intervention. Indeed, I think having had an intervention from the honourable member, I believe is a rite of passage in this House, which I can now very happily take. So thank you very much. And I couldn't agree with him more, particularly around constituencies such as my own, where you have a mix of urban and rural, where the rural pricing is hit particularly hard, often in areas which have poorer public transport as well, so it is felt even more. Most small businesses rely on efficient and cost-effective transport for their deliveries, staff and customers, and that often means running and fueling a car or a van. High prices at the pumps have a direct impact on small businesses and squeeze already thin margins in the ongoing cost of living crisis and the cost of doing business. Research by the Federation of Small Businesses shows that more than 3/4 of businesses saw their costs go up in the last quarter, and of them more than a quarter said the increased price of fuel was one of the main reasons for that rise. Now, my constituency is just 20 miles from Scotland's oil refinery at Grangemouth, and yet residents in Dunfermline are consistently paying a full 5 pence per litre more than those nearby in Glasgow, Stirling, Glenrothes or Kirkcaldy. That is despite local supermarkets of Tesco and Asda, as well as a host of other outlets such as BP and others in the city, all supposedly competing to be the driver's choice. What we see in Dunfermline is a cluster of prices around the same levels within the city. The price clustering is seen around Dunfermline, with all supermarkets and suppliers at roughly the same price. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is not local competition, that is a local cartel. Even worse, Madam Deputy Speaker, my constituents are paying 134.7 pence per litre at Asda in Dunfermline, while at Asda and Bridge of Dee store in Aberdeen, 112 miles further north, they pay just 121.7 at the pump. Never mind 5 pence, that is a difference of 13 pence per litre. In rural and semi-rural areas, as was referred to earlier on, where public transport infrastructure is less entrenched, and certainly in my constituency, where the train service is frequently short-formed, delayed or cancelled at short notice, fuel is not a choice, it's a necessity. My constituents in Dunfermline and Dollar rely on their vehicles more heavily, yet they often face the highest prices. That is an issue of basic fairness. I am all in favour of market forces to use to shape prices, but not where the market is demonstrably broken. And fuel pricing has all the signs of a broken market mechanism. It is nothing short of outrageous that the most essential aspects of daily life are subject to broken competition and a non-functioning market in what appears to be price clustering by retailers. Across the constituency, small businesses, sole traders like plumbers, builders, the florists, taxi drivers, along with families, are paying the price. As we might say in Scotland, Madam Deputy Speaker, small businesses are being pumped at the pumps. Madam Deputy Speaker, like many fellow members in this House, I welcome the Chancellor's announcement in the budget that we just passed this evening on freezing fuel duty, which will help people still feeling the impact of out-of-control inflation on their take-home pay. However, while this pricing behaviour by retailers continues, I am concerned the full benefit of this government's efforts to keep down fuel costs will not be passed on to my constituents. To help the House fully understand the consequences of this kind of price clustering and the effects of the broken market, I would like to share the experience of one of my constituents, Amy, a 20-year-old apprentice who wrote to me just last month. Amy was very proud to secure her apprenticeship, which she started this autumn, earning the apprentice minimum wage of £6.40 an hour. With just over £1,000 a month to live on, Amy uses £200 a month of her hard-earned wages on fuel. She gets her petrol at Asda in Dunfermline, where yesterday, as I mentioned, unleaded was 134.7 pence a litre. So Amy's £200 is buying her 148.48 litres of fuel. However, if Amy was buying her petrol at Asda and Bridge of Dee in Aberdeen, as I mentioned, where unleaded was 121.7 pence a litre yesterday, she'd have paid just £180 for the same amount of fuel, a full £20 a month difference. Over the course of a year, Amy would have to work an additional 36 hours just to pay for the difference in the price of petrol for her to get to and from work. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is not justifiable. Amy, who is learning while earning, is experiencing a real terms pay cut differential, not due to anything she has done, but because of the effect of this broken market. Now, we encourage the use of greener transport. However, we have seen failures of the SNP government and ScotRail to provide Fife with a reliable service. So that isn't an option for people like Amy with short trains and an unreliable service, particularly in West Fife. One step the SNP and Green Coalition did take at Holyrood was to remove peak fares, which saw an increased train usage of 6.8%. This encouragement of behavioural change, however, was swiftly removed, just like the Scottish Greens from the Coalition, when the financial incentives of fairer train fares were also removed recently. Behavioural change of a positive nature does not happen overnight. However, the switch back to the car from the train has and does. This short-sighted decision, often like the short-form trains that serve the region, has put people off using green transport. Madam Deputy Speaker, this means that after being let down by the Scottish Government, commuters in Dunfermline are being taken advantage of by fuel retailers and market competition in my constituency.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Very happy to give way.
My honourable friend is making an excellent speech, and I also have noticed in my constituency of Halesowen that many fuel retailers are not passing on benefits to drivers, and the Competition and Markets Authority, as he recognised, has said that those competition practices are unfair. I have noticed that the government is taking forward a fuel finder app that will allow customers and drivers to find out more information about different retailers that will drive that competition. Does he agree with me that the government should do that as soon as possible so we can get that transparency accurate, so drivers in my constituency and others are able to get savings from that fuel?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and it's a point I'll actually come on to just shortly about the action that this government is also taking, but where I think there is still more that needs to be done. Madam Deputy Speaker, the impact goes beyond personal strain. It creates an uneven playing field for businesses and hinders economic growth by harming small business owners in Dunfermline who rely on their vehicles for operation. Now, in this budget, the government has taken a wide range of steps to help working people across the country, including in my constituency. a wage rise for 200,000 Scots, record funding to Scotland, fixing the miners' pension scheme, protecting the pensions triple lock and, as I've mentioned, committing the funds to maintain the freeze on fuel duty that the Conservatives failed to do and which would have seen people like my constituent Amy paying even more for fuel. I'm also pleased that this new government has confirmed it will implement 2 of the CMA's recommendations, an open data scheme called Fuel Finder that will require all fuel retailers to share their prices in real time, and a road fuels monitoring function that will report on the state of competition in the road fuel market. Scenario modelling by the CMA suggests pump prices could reduce by between 1 and 6 pence per litre as a result of these measures, helping to ensure drivers get a fair deal for fuel across the UK. I'm very keen to hear from the Minister what more she believes the Government can do specifically around the point of ensuring a fair and functional fuel market so pricing is fair and not allowed to cluster into local price fixing, the kind of which we see in Dunfermline at the moment. Madam Deputy Speaker, while fuel prices are undoubtedly subject to a range of external factors, as we've seen across a number of years, increasing transparency and ensuring real competition between forecourts, we can have a functioning market where competition helps drive down prices. But there is nothing stopping fuel retailers right now from choosing to do the right thing, stabilising fuel prices, removing price clusters like I see in Dunfermline, and ensuring people like Amy are not financially penalised by where they live. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Government, I hope, will build on the excellent start it has made to protect working people and small businesses, and I hope we'll be able to do more to stop fuel retailers profiteering on the back of hard-working people up and down the country. Thank you.
I call the Minister to respond.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by congratulating my honourable friend for securing this debate and for making such an excellent contribution and for championing the needs of consumers, both in his constituency and indeed across the UK, where so many people have the same struggles. Can I welcome the opportunity to discuss this very important matter of the road fuel market? This Government is committed to fixing the foundations of the economy, delivering change by protecting working people and rebuilding Britain. It cannot be the case that fuel retailers register record profits and not pass on savings when the burden is being unduly felt by hard-working families and businesses. Which is why I'm so grateful for my honourable friend's story about Amy. Her story is one that I suspect is familiar to many other MPs in their constituencies, and we are committed to supporting them with the cost of living and the cost of fuel. I agree with my honourable friend that for so many, vehicles are more than just a means of transport. They are a lifeline. I know they play an integral role in connecting working people, families, communities and businesses, especially in rural areas. And in the case of young people like Amy, her car is a means to forging a career and earning meaningful, well-paid work. This Government is committed to delivering for drivers, but also providing a range of transport options to make it possible that people like Amy shouldn't have to worry about how they get to work. And that's why this Government made the decision at last week's budget to freeze fuel duty for a further year, which I know the honourable member, my honourable friend, has welcomed. I want to commend his dedication to campaigning against high fuel prices and for families, working people and small businesses to get a fairer deal on fuel across his constituency and Scotland. It is imperative that we have a well-functioning, transparent and competitive road fuels market. We want to ensure that drivers can get a fair price for their fuel and that fuel retailers remain transparent and do not overcharge. We expect all fuel retailers to pass on any savings at the pump. As my honourable friend set out, the Competition and Markets Authority published its road fuels market study in July 2023 and found competition across the retail market had weakened. The CMA found problems in relation to 3 aspects of the retail market: national, local and motorway. At a national level, it found that retail margins had risen significantly since 2019, with the supermarket retailers following a similar trend of increased margins on fuel. The historic price leaders in the market, primarily Asda but also Morrisons to some extent, had taken a less aggressive approach to pricing and had significantly increased their margins over recent years. The rest of the fuel retailers took a passive approach and followed this trend. At a local level, the CMA found significant price differences between local areas, with lower prices at a forecourt typically associated with having a supermarket competitor nearby. I know this is something the honourable member is concerned about and raised with the Leader of the House at business questions recently, as he has done today in this debate by sharing Amy's experience. On motorway pricing, the CMA found that drivers without access to fuel cards, which account for 20 to 25% of fuel sales on motorways, were paying significantly more to fill up at a motorway service area than they would elsewhere, due to limited competitive pressure. As a result of these factors, the CMA found that drivers have been paying more than would otherwise have been the case. It is estimated the financial impact of the 3% increase in average supermarket fuel margin from 2019 to 2022 resulted in a combined additional cost of around £900 million for customers of the 4 supermarket fuel retailers in 2022 alone, which is equivalent to around £75 million a month for this period. While fuel prices are now a lot lower than at the all-time peak in July 2022, weakened competition still persists. The CMA's latest monitoring update in July of this year estimated that the increase in retail fuel margins compared to 2019 resulted in increased fuel costs for drivers in 2023 of over £1.6 billion. Weak competition is still failing consumers. This is hugely concerning. The price of petrol and diesel is an important issue. When prices are high, the impacts are felt by everyone. We expect all fuel retailers to pass on any savings at the pump. As my honourable friend has said, to address these issues, the CMA made recommendations for the government to, first, implement an open data source for fuel prices, requiring retailers to share their prices on a real-time basis and allow drivers to be better informed on prices and easily compare prices. And second, launch an ongoing monitoring function for the retail market to assess how well competition is working. The government has accepted these recommendations. On the CMA's first recommendation, last week, as part of the autumn budget, we confirmed that we will implement a statutory open data scheme called Fuel Finder. Fuel Finder will require all retail petrol filling stations in the UK to report prices and when a fuel becomes unavailable within 30 minutes of a change. The data will be shared openly and freely to third parties so it can be incorporated into their price comparison websites or apps, sat-navs and other consumer-facing products which consumers can use. Fuel Finder will empower drivers to compare prices more easily and make more informed decisions on where to buy their petrol and diesel. This will increase pressure on fuel retailers to compete strongly to attract customers by lowering their prices or improving their services at the forecourt. The government is committed to implementing Fuel Finder as quickly as possible. We will begin procurement for the full Fuel Finder aggregator in early 2025. The Data, Use and Access Bill that this government has brought forward will provide the legislative basis to set up Fuel Finder. And subject to parliamentary timings, we aim to launch Fuel Finder by the end of 2025. On the CMA's second recommendation, the CMA will receive statutory information gathering powers through the Digital Markets Competition and Consumers Act of 2024 to undertake the permanent monitoring function. We are aiming to commence those provisions by January 2025. The CMA will be able to assess and monitor the state of competition in the retail market, both nationally and locally, provide ongoing scrutiny of those prices and advise government if further intervention is needed to protect consumers. The transition from fossil fuel to zero-carbon vehicles is likely to lead to further risks, weakening of competition in the remaining fossil fuel-based road fuels market. This transition is likely to be felt particularly by less well-off consumers and those living in rural areas. The CMA will be able to monitor the market through this transition and benefit consumers by ensuring that the market continues to function properly. The CMA will therefore publish an annual report on the state of competition in the sector and 3 shorter updates on prices, costs and margins, and information on price trends across the UK and over time. Taken together, Fuel Finder and the CMA monitoring function will reinforce each other in providing a new source of competitive pressure in favour of greater competition on the road fuel retail sector. I will give way.
Thank you very much. One of the interesting things that has been brought to my attention by residents in Harrogate and Knaresborough is it's obviously we're quite rural given we're on the periphery, of North Yorkshire, but there's also an aspect about an area that's got quite a lot of tourism coming into it and higher housing and costs more generally. So when we're talking about trying to reduce those fuel prices, what consideration will be given to those regional and inter-regional inequalities in fuel pricing? Is there any more further information that the Minister can give on that?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention? He makes a good point, and I think this is why we need to start properly monitoring what the actual situation is. So when we all have access to that real-time data and we can understand exactly what's happening, and the CMA can be monitoring that and reporting to government, government can go, actually, there is a more systemic problem here that we need to tackle, and there is some more interventions that we need to make. And I think government stands ready to look to do those things. But I think the first stage of having the data available so we understand what's going on in a proper way will help us to do that. While fuel prices are inevitably uncertain and sensitive to wider global factors, our published impact assessment estimates that by increasing transparency and encouraging competition between petrol filling stations, this could result in fuel cost savings for drivers totalling £7.7 billion over 10 years. And this amounts to savings of 1 to 6 pence per litre at the pump. I'm sure my honourable friend and others will agree this would be very welcomed. In addition, at the budget, the Chancellor announced that the government is extending the temporary 5p cut to fuel duty rates for a further 12 months until March 2026. Alongside this, the government will not increase 2026 rates in line with the Retail Price Index, or RPI, taken together a tax cut worth £3 billion in 2025-6. The freeze in fuel duty will save the average car driver £59 in 25-26. These actions have been welcomed by stakeholders such as the RAC and the AA. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to assure the House and my honourable friend that the government is committed to delivering for drivers. Our ultimate goal here is to increase the levels of transparency for consumers, encourage fuel retailers into becoming more competitive. That way, consumers will send the clearest signal to them that they will not pay extortionate prices when given a range of options to choose from. We are confident that these measures will help facilitate a competitive road fuels retail market, increase price transparency and protect consumer interests. I'd like to thank again my honourable friend for bringing forward this very important debate. Thank you.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order! Order!